You're sleeping next to someone you used to know everything about, and you can't figure out exactly when that changed. Most couples don't fall out of love. They fall into exhaustion, silence, and invisible resentment. And they start calling it normal. But there is nothing normal about sleeping next to a stranger for 20 years. And the terrifying part? Most couples don't even notice it's happening until it's already too late. This video is about why so many couples who seemed strong, happy, and genuinely connected slowly become roommates after having a baby. Not because they stopped loving each other, but because of specific psychological mechanisms that activate the moment a child enters the relationship, and almost no one sees them coming. If you felt the distance growing between you and your partner since you became parents, you are not broken, but you are at risk, and by the end of this video, you will understand exactly why and what you can still do about it. Stay with me, because what comes in the next few minutes might be the most important thing you watch this year. The silent earthquake. The baby arrives. Everyone celebrates. The nursery is decorated. There are flowers at the hospital door. Friends come to visit with gifts. And on the surface, everything looks like a dream. But underneath that dream, something fundamental just changed in the architecture of the relationship. When a baby is born, the couple stops being two people who chose each other and becomes a functioning unit organized around the survival of a third being. The shift is biological, psychological, and completely unconscious. Neither person decides to make their partner secondary. It simply happens. Psychologists call this the transition to parenthood, and research from the Gottman Institute, one of the most respected relationship research centers in the world, shows that 67% of couples experience a significant drop in relationship satisfaction within the first 3 years after having their first child. Not a small dip, a significant drop. The interesting part is this: the couples who feel the sharpest drop are often the ones who were most satisfied before the baby. Why? Because they had more to lose, their baseline was higher. The contrast becomes unbearable. And here's what makes this so dangerous. The couple rarely identifies the problem as a relationship problem. They're tired. They're busy. They think things will get better once the baby sleeps through the night, once they go back to work, once the child starts school. They keep pushing the problem forward, and the distance grows in silence. The earthquake already happened. Most people just don't feel it until the house is already cracked. The identity trap. Before the baby, you had an identity. You were a person with interests, desires, ambitions, and preferences. You were also someone's partner, but that was one part of who you were. After the baby, millions of people, especially mothers, but increasingly fathers too, experience what psychologists call identity absorption. The parental role doesn't just expand, it swallows everything else. You stop being a woman who loves music, reads novels, and likes hiking on weekends. You become mom. Full stop. Your desires become secondary. Your needs become a burden. And somewhere in the middle of all of that, you also stop being a partner. Here's where it gets complicated. The person going through identity absorption often doesn't realize it's happening. They're proud of their dedication. They identify completely with the parental role. They measure their worth by how good of a parent they are. And slowly, they lose touch with the version of themselves their partner fell in love with. The partner on the other side of this feels it. They feel like they lost the person they chose. But they can't say that, because saying "I miss who you were before the baby" sounds like a complaint against the child itself. So they go quiet. Two people, both changing, neither talking. The silence fills with assumptions, and the assumptions turn into resentment. There's a term for this specific dynamic: invisible grief. Both partners are grieving something: their freedom, their intimacy, their identity, their partnership. But neither one has a socially acceptable space to do it. So the grief goes underground. And underground grief is one of the most corrosive forces a relationship can face. If you're watching this and recognizing yourself in any of this, keep watching, because the next block explains exactly what happens when that grief hits the brain. What sleep deprivation does to a relationship. This one is underestimated to a criminal degree. Everyone knows sleep deprivation is bad, but very few people understand what it specifically does to a couple's ability to function as a team. A study published in the journal Social Psychological and Personality Science found that couples who slept poorly were significantly less empathetic toward each other the following day. They felt less appreciated. They perceived their partner as less responsive. They were quicker to feel criticized. And, this is the key part, they were less able to regulate the negative emotions that came up as a result. Translation: Sleep deprivation doesn't just make you tired, it makes your relationship worse. At a neurological level, the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for emotional regulation, empathy, rational decision-making, and long-term thinking, is the first thing to go offline when you're sleep deprived. What remains active is the amygdala, the threat detection center, the part that reacts, not thinks, the part that reads a partner's neutral facial expression as hostile, the part that turns a frustrated tone of voice into a personal attack. Now imagine running your relationship almost entirely from that space. For months, for some couples, for years, every interaction carries extra weight. A sigh becomes a judgment. I'm tired becomes, I don't want to be with you. A forgotten chore becomes a statement about who doesn't care. The brain, running on empty, defaults to worst-case interpretations. And here's what nobody tells you. New parents don't know this is happening. They think the irritability is their own fault. They think the coldness is real. They think the distance is a sign of something broken, rather than a sign of two exhausted brains doing exactly what sleep-deprived brains do. The damage compounds when both people are sleep-deprived simultaneously, which is exactly what happens with a newborn. You're not just dealing with your own dysregulated brain, you're responding to another dysregulated brain. With zero buffer, zero patience, zero perspective. The arguments that happen in this window are not really about the dishes. They're not really about who got up last night. They're the sound of two human nervous systems in survival mode, trying to negotiate a reality they were never fully prepared for. And the scariest part? This is only one of the mechanisms. There are 6 more. Keep watching. The division of labor rupture. Here's where statistics become uncomfortable. Even in couples who consider themselves modern, progressive, and equal, the arrival of a baby almost universally triggers a sharp return to traditional gender roles, and it happens without either person fully intending it. Research consistently shows that after having children, women's workload, including childcare, household management, and the invisible mental load of scheduling, anticipating, and organizing, increases dramatically more than men's, even when both partners work full-time. The mother tracks the pediatrician appointments. She remembers when the next vaccination is. She notices when the diapers are running low. She's the one who lies awake thinking about whether the baby's rash needs a doctor or if it'll resolve itself. She coordinates the daycare waitlist, the babysitter backup plan, the family holiday schedule. This isn't just extra work, it's the cognitive overhead of being the primary manager of a household and a child, while still being expected to show up fully at work and as a partner. The result? Resentment. Not the loud, explosive kind, but the quiet, accumulating kind. The kind that lives in the pauses between sentences. That shows up as a slight withdrawal when the partner reaches for her hand. That comes out sideways during an argument about something completely unrelated. And the partner who isn't carrying this load often can't see it, not because they're selfish, but because mental load is invisible by design. You can't see the 4 simultaneous threads running in someone else's head. You see someone who seems stressed but can't identify why. So he thinks she's impossible to please. She thinks he doesn't pay attention. Neither is entirely wrong. Both are missing the full picture. There's a specific psychological effect at play here, the feeling of being unseen. When your contribution goes unacknowledged, when your invisible labor remains invisible, the emotional connection to your partner starts to thin. You can't feel close to someone who doesn't see you, and you can't feel seen if the person next to you doesn't know what they're not noticing. This is one of the most direct pipelines from new parenthood to emotional divorce, and most couples never address it directly, because addressing it requires naming something that both people are ashamed of. If any of this feels familiar, save this video. You're going to want to come back to it. The touch famine. This block is about something most couples are too embarrassed to admit. They stopped touching each other. Not just sexually, completely. Touch is one of the most fundamental mechanisms of human bonding. Before language, before reason, before romantic love even existed as a concept. Touch was how humans signaled safety, trust, and connection. Oxytocin, the bonding hormone, is released during physical contact. It's the chemical substrate of closeness. Holding hands, a hand on the back, a kiss on the forehead, a hug that lasts more than 2 seconds. These aren't just nice things to do. They are the biological maintenance of emotional connection. After a baby arrives, touch gets complicated in ways nobody fully prepares you for. For the primary caregiver, often the mother, touch becomes associated with demand, The baby needs to be held, fed, comforted, carried. The body is rarely off. Every touch becomes a request, and at the end of a day of that, the idea of being touched by a partner doesn't feel like comfort, it feels like another claim. Researchers have a name for this: touched out. It's the state of sensory overwhelm from sustained physical contact that leaves a person craving physical space, rather than more touch. It's not rejection, it's saturation. But the partner who reaches out and is consistently pulled away from doesn't interpret it as saturation, they interpret it as rejection, as loss of attraction, as a signal that something is wrong with them, or with the relationship, and so they stop reaching out. Self-protection kicks in, the touch stops, the oxytocin drops, the sense of closeness fades, and neither person can quite put their finger on the moment it happened. This is called the intimacy spiral, and it works in one direction, downward. Less touch leads to less oxytocin, leads to less emotional closeness, leads to less desire to touch, leads to even less touch. Without a deliberate intervention, it doesn't reverse on its own. The body remembers its partner through touch. When touch disappears, the body starts to forget. And the heart follows the body. The invisible scoreboard. This one operates entirely below the surface, and it destroys more relationships than almost any other mechanism on this list. After a baby arrives, many couples, without ever consciously deciding to, begin keeping score. Not in a dramatic way, not in a way they'd even admit if asked, but the tracking happens automatically, in the background, in the part of the brain that monitors fairness and reciprocity. He got to sleep in on Saturday. I got up 3 times last night. She got a shower alone. I haven't had 15 minutes to myself in 4 days. He went to the gym. The last time I did something for myself was 3 weeks ago. She had lunch with a friend. I can't even remember the last time I talked to someone who wasn't asking me for something. The scoreboard grows without either person realizing it. And the longer it operates, the more it shapes perception, because the brain doesn't track all sacrifices equally. It dramatically overestimates its own contribution and underestimates the other person's. This isn't selfishness, it's cognitive bias. Research in behavioral psychology shows that people consistently rate their own effort as higher than their partner's, even in genuinely balanced situations. Add severe sleep deprivation, identity loss, touch famine, and unequal mental load, and the distortion becomes extreme. The result? Both people feel they're giving more than they're getting. Both people feel underappreciated. Both people feel like the relationship has become one-sided, but from opposite directions. This creates a particularly toxic dynamic, the mutual victim loop. Each partner sees themselves as the one carrying more weight. Each is waiting for the other to acknowledge it first. Neither does. The resentment calcifies. And then something small happens. A forgotten grocery item, a remark about screen time, a sigh at the wrong moment, and the scoreboard explodes. The argument isn't about the groceries. It's about 6 months of accumulated invisible debt. Couples who get through this phase don't resolve the scoreboard during the argument. They learn to dissolve it before it forms. That's a skill. And skills can be learned. I'll show you exactly what that looks like in a moment. The desire equation. Let's talk directly about sex. Not because it's the most important thing in a relationship, but because the way couples relate to it after having children reveals almost everything about the state of their connection. Desire doesn't live in a vacuum. It lives in safety, curiosity, energy, and emotional presence. When those conditions are absent, when you're exhausted, resentful, disconnected, and touched out, desire doesn't just decrease. It disappears entirely. And for many people, especially mothers, navigating postpartum hormonal shifts, it can stay absent for months or years. This creates asymmetry. One partner wants intimacy and feels rejected. The other is too depleted to even access desire and feels pressured by the wanting. Both feel alone. What makes this worse is the cultural story we tell about sex in long-term relationships. There's an unspoken assumption that couples should want each other regularly, and that when desire disappears, it means love is gone. So when desire vanishes after a baby, both people panic, and the panic itself creates more distance. Here's what the research actually shows. Sexual desire after childbirth is impacted by a specific combination of physical recovery, hormonal changes, breastfeeding, sleep deprivation, body image, and relationship quality. It is not a reliable indicator of love. It is a symptom of conditions, most of which are temporary. But temporary doesn't feel temporary when you're living inside it. And that gap between reality and perception is where relationships break. Esther Perel, one of the world's leading researchers on desire in long-term relationships, makes a distinction that changes everything. The opposite of desire is not absence of sex. The opposite of desire is absence of presence. When two people are fully present with each other, genuinely curious, attentive, alive to each other, desire follows. When they are coexisting in parallel rather than truly connecting, desire goes dormant. So the question isn't, how do we have more sex? The question is, how do we become present to each other again? And the answer to that requires dismantling the very mechanisms this entire video has been building toward. The next block is where it all comes together. Don't skip it. The communication collapse. Couples in this phase don't stop talking. They talk constantly about logistics, who's picking up from daycare, what's for dinner, did the pediatrician call back, did you pay that bill, when is your mother coming? This is not communication, it's coordination, and the difference is fundamental. Emotional communication requires vulnerability. It requires saying something that costs you something, exposing a fear, a need, a longing, and trusting the other person to receive it. After months of depletion, resentment, and disconnection, that kind of vulnerability feels like risk. So couples retreat to logistics. It feels safer. And the safer it feels, the further real connection gets. John Gottman's research identified 4 specific communication patterns. He called them the 4 horsemen that predict relationship breakdown with 94% accuracy. They are criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. What's striking is how naturally all 4 emerge from everything we've described in this video. Criticism sounds like, you never help without being asked. It attacks the person, not the behavior. It's different from a complaint, which is specific, targeted, and can be addressed. Criticism has no solution. It's an indictment. Contempt is the most destructive of all. Eye-rolling, dismissiveness, sarcasm with an edge. A tone that communicates, you are beneath me. It signals disgust rather than frustration. Couples who show sustained contempt for each other don't just face higher divorce rates, they face measurably worse physical health outcomes. The body absorbs what the relationship is doing. Defensiveness is the refusal to hear. Every critique becomes an unfair attack. Every observation becomes a battle to win. Defensiveness shuts the loop of communication completely because nothing can get in. Stonewalling is the shutdown. The partner who goes silent, leaves the room, becomes unreachable. It feels like self-protection, and it is. But to the person on the receiving end, it feels like abandonment. New parents rotate through all 4 of these without recognizing what they're doing. They are not bad people. They are people whose emotional capacity has been systematically depleted, reacting from survival mode instead of from intention. The antidote to each of these horsemen exists. It is teachable. But first, you have to recognize which ones you're already running. What couples who survive this do differently. This is not about the couples who manage to be perfect parents and still maintain a picture-perfect romance. Those don't exist. This is about the couples who go through the same fire, the same sleepless nights, the same mental overload, the same identity disruption, the same touch famine, and come out on the other side still genuinely connected to each other. What are they doing differently? Research and clinical observation point to several specific behaviors. First, they named the problem. They said out loud, to each other, we are losing each other. Not as an accusation, as an observation, as something they both agreed was real and worth fighting against. Naming it together transforms the dynamic from you versus me to us versus the problem. Second, they protected micro moments of connection, not grand romantic gestures. 15 minutes at night with phones off. A genuine question, not how was your day, but what was the hardest part of today for you? A text in the afternoon that says nothing but thinking of you. These are not small things. They are the structural maintenance that keeps a relationship from collapsing under the weight of everything else. Third, they asked for help and received it. From family, from friends, from a therapist, from a parenting group. Couples who try to absorb all the stress of new parenthood inside the relationship, without any outside support, put a load on the partnership it was never built to carry. Building a support network isn't a luxury, it's maintenance. Fourth, they had explicit conversations about the division of labor, not passive-aggressive hints, not accumulating resentment. Direct, specific conversations. Here's what I need, Here's what I can't keep doing alone. What can we redesign? These conversations are uncomfortable. They are also the only way through. Fifth, they chose each other consciously, repeatedly, in small ways. A hand held in the kitchen. A laugh shared over something only they understood. An acknowledgement, I see how hard you're working, that costs nothing and means everything. Choice, repeated in tiny moments, is what keeps love from becoming furniture. The couples who survive this don't have a secret. They have discipline, they have honesty, and they have the willingness to be uncomfortable for the sake of something they decided still matters. If this is resonating with you, share this video with your partner right now, not as a criticism, as an invitation. The decision point. Here is the truth that nobody says out loud at baby showers, or at pediatrician appointments, or at family dinners where everyone is performing happiness. Having a child is one of the most destabilizing events a relationship can survive. Not because love disappears, but because everything that love was built on, time, attention, energy, identity, physical closeness, emotional availability, gets radically redistributed the moment a new life enters the picture. The couples who make it are not the ones who loved each other more. They are the ones who were honest enough to say we are struggling before the struggling became we are strangers. There is a window. It is not open forever. The longer distance operates without being named and addressed, the more permanent it becomes. Not because love dies suddenly, but because it fades incrementally, unnoticed, the way light fades at dusk, and by the time you look up, it's already dark. If you recognized yourself in any part of this video, if the scoreboard, the silence, the touched-out exhaustion, the logistics-only conversations feel familiar, that recognition is not an accusation. It is information, and information is the beginning of change. The relationship you had before the baby is not gone, but it needs to be rebuilt into something new, something that includes the people you have both become. That rebuild doesn't happen automatically. It happens because you decide it will. The decision isn't made once. It's made every day, in small moments, in the way you look at your partner when they're not looking, in whether you ask how they really are, in whether you protect even 15 minutes where neither of you is a parent. Just two people who chose each other. You chose each other before the child. And you can choose each other again, but it starts with the choice, not with waiting for the right moment, the right energy, or the right version of yourself. The moment is now. The version you have is enough. If this video helped you see something you hadn't seen before, save it, share it with someone who needs it. And if you're in a relationship that's feeling the distance right now, show it to your partner, not as a criticism, as an invitation. The distance between two people is never permanent. It's just evidence of where attention stopped being paid. Pay it back. It's worth it.